It started like any other visit. Every couple of months, I'd take the bus out to my uncle's house for the weekend. It was a little escape I'd grown to look forward to. Familiar roads, familiar door, familiar scent of old furniture, and the faint citrus cleaner he always used on the kitchen tiles. There was a softness to that house, a kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt settled. My parents used to say, I got my imagination from him. He was the cool uncle, the one who gave me my first sketchbook, who taught me how to fold comic pages without ruining the spine, who told me that stories could save people, even if they were made up. He was never married, no kids, but he made space for me like I belonged there, and I did. He gave me a little corner of the living room years ago, just mine, a faded green beanbag by the big reading lamp, a wooden crate stacked with old Marvel and DC comics, and a tiny coaster where I could keep my hot chocolate without getting yelled at. I called it my comic station when I was younger. He never corrected me. Even now, as a teenager, it still felt like sacred ground. I'd walk in, throw my bag on the couch, and beeline for that corner like I was 6 again. That's where I was that night, sitting cross-legged in that same beanbag, half lost in a storyline I'd read a dozen times but still loved, like it was new. The panels, the colors, the dialogue, it all wrapped around me like a blanket I didn't have to explain. If you've ever found peace in a story, comment the word safe, because in that moment, that's what I was. Safe. Or at least I thought I was. I was still reading when I heard the couch creak behind me. Nothing unusual. My uncle always liked to watch TV while I read, half dozing through reruns or scrolling through his phone. I didn't look up. The story had me. It was one of those issues where the hero loses something important but pretends he's fine. I always lingered on those panels. They felt real. Then the noise came again, a softer shift, a body moving, and the next thing I knew, he was beside me, not on the couch. On the floor, he sat down with a low grunt, legs stretched out, arms resting on his knees. Closer than I expected. I glanced over, and he gave a short smile. Mind if I join you down here? I shrugged. Sure. But the beanbag was small, and the floor wasn't much wider. His leg brushed against mine as he leaned forward. I adjusted slightly, not away. Just enough to make space. But he didn't. He leaned closer, head tilted toward the comic in my lap. Which one's this? Ah, Civil War. The reprint edition. He nodded, but his eyes didn't move with the panels. They stayed still, not scanning, not reading, just fixed. It took me a second to realize he was still looking, not at the comic. At me. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. And in that pause, the kind where the room doesn't feel any different, but your stomach does, something shifted. Just a little, enough to notice. I kept reading, trying to focus on the words, trying to pretend the closeness didn't bother me, that the warmth from his side wasn't seeping under my skin, that the story still held me the way it used to. Hey, he said suddenly, voice low, do you mind reading it out loud? I looked up. He was watching me, not the comic, not the panels, just me. I always liked your story voices when you were younger, he added. You used to act out the characters. Remember that? I nodded. I did remember. Back when I was 8, when I thought reading out loud made me sound like a superhero, when I thought the world was made of people who meant well. I hesitated, but then cleared my throat and began. It was awkward at first. My voice didn't match the text like it used to. My tone fell flat on lines that once felt powerful, but I kept going, hoping he'd stop watching so closely, hoping the old comfort would return if I pretended hard enough. As I read, I felt the couch shift slightly, but his arm moved behind me, not on me, just resting across the backrest, just close enough to feel like a presence. I told myself it didn't mean anything, but I could hear his breathing now, slower than mine, measured, like he wasn't focused on the story. I glanced sideways and caught his expression. Soft, too soft. He smiled when I reached a funny line, but his laugh came too late, and too quiet, like he wasn't hearing the comic at all. Then, out of nowhere, he reached over and brushed something from my forehead. Just a strand of hair. His fingers barely touched my skin. It was gentle, almost fatherly, but something inside me pulled back. It felt parental, but it didn't feel right. And that's when the confusion started, because nothing had happened, but something had, and I didn't know how to name it yet. I kept reading, or at least I tried to, but the words started to blur. My voice caught on a line, something about loyalty, about betrayal, and I stumbled, read it too fast. My throat dry, my timing off. He leaned a little closer. Try that line again, he said softly, but slower this time, softer, like it means more. I swallowed. Okay, I murmured. I went back a few lines, adjusted my tone. I tried to make it sound like I used to, like a kid pretending to be a hero, but the act didn't land. It felt rehearsed, stiff, like I was trying to summon someone I no longer was. He didn't comment again, but I could hear his breath now, not loud, just close. That was when I realized how still the room had become. No TV in the background, no clock ticking, no passing car outside, just the pages turning and his breath beside me. And then I felt it. His hand, soft, resting on my back right between My shoulder blades, not rubbing, not patting, just placed, as if it belonged there, as if it had always been there. I didn't move, not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't sure if I was allowed to. I kept staring at the comic in my lap, panels frozen mid-action, a hero mid-jump, a villain mid-sentence. But the story was gone now. The comic book was still open, but suddenly, I couldn't read any more. I wasn't even sure if I was breathing. And him, he didn't say another word. It wasn't what he said. It was how quiet he became, how still, like he was waiting for something, or making sure he didn't break the moment, or making sure I did. I wanted to shift, to sit up, to create space, but even that felt like too loud a decision. I just stayed there, silent. If you've ever felt something wasn't right but couldn't explain it right, truth in the comments, because I didn't have the words for it either. Not yet. I placed my thumb between the pages and closed the comic halfway. I think I'm getting tired, I said. It came out softer than I meant it to, like a suggestion, not a decision. He turned to look at me. Just one more page, he said, for me. He smiled like it was nothing, like it was small, like the moment wasn't hanging in the air between us. Too heavy to name. I hesitated, then nodded once and opened the comic again. My hands felt stiff, like the muscles had to remember how to turn paper, but I didn't start reading. I couldn't find my voice. And then his hand moved downward, not fast, not aggressive, just placed on my knee through the fabric of my jeans, warm and steady. He didn't speak, he didn't move it, he didn't do anything else, and that somehow made it worse. There was no joke, no correction, no context, just the weight of his hand, and the sound of my breath getting quieter and quicker. I didn't look at him, I stared at the comic, a hero frozen in the middle of a leap, a villain caught with his mouth open, words hovering above his head. That moment stretched like a speech bubble with no words inside. I don't know how long we sat like that. 5 seconds, 10, a minute. All I know is that every part of me was aware of that contact, not for how strong it was, but for how still. There was no pressure, but it carried weight. I wanted to move. I wanted to say something. I wanted to stand up and make the moment end, but something inside me stayed quiet, because when someone you've trusted your whole life crosses a line, your body doesn't always know what to do. It just waits. And that's what I did. I waited. I let a yawn slip out, exaggerated just enough to seem real. I think I'll go brush my teeth. Get to bed early, I mumbled, not meeting his eyes. The hand lifted from my knee slowly. No apology, no explanation. Just absence. He stood up, stretching his arms above his head like it was any other night. You've always had the best imagination, he said, smiling. That line landed somewhere sharp. I wasn't sure what he meant, but it felt too casual, too knowing, too rehearsed. I nodded once and stood, comic still in my hand, my body stiff like it had forgotten how to move naturally. I walked to the bathroom, down the hall, every step echoing louder than it should have in that quiet house. I shut the door, then locked it, then sat down on the floor, back against the cabinet, knees pulled to my chest. I didn't cry, I didn't speak. I just sat there, letting the stillness wrap around me again, but this time, it didn't feel safe. It felt like hiding. Eventually, I stood and looked in the mirror, and the reflection staring back at me didn't look scared, didn't look angry, didn't even look different, but I could feel it. Something had shifted. I looked in the mirror and saw someone who wasn't sure what just happened, but knew it wasn't okay. The next morning, sunlight crept through the curtains like it was trying not to wake anything it shouldn't. I stayed in bed longer than usual, pretending to be asleep, even after I heard him in the kitchen, humming softly. Pans clinking, kettle whistling. Eventually, I got up. The hallway smelled like toast and coffee, the same as always. He stood at the stove in his usual pajama pants and white t-shirt, flipping eggs like nothing in the world had shifted. Morning, he said without turning around. You hungry? I nodded. He made breakfast, just like he always did. 2 eggs, toast, slightly burnt, a slice of orange on the side like a signature, and then he started talking. About comics again. Asked if I'd ever finished the one from last night. Told me he found a new issue I might like. Said he'd leave it on the table for me to take home. I chewed slowly, didn't say much, just nodded, eyes on the plate, ears half closed. Nothing in his voice gave anything away. No hint, no tension, no echo of the night before, and maybe that was the worst part. Not what he did, but how easily he erased it. Before I left, he handed me the comic. New series, he said. Let me know what you think. I looked at the cover. I said I'd read it later, but I never did. That comic used to be my escape. The colors, the characters, the noise of another world that made mine feel small enough to carry. But now, it reminds me of how fast comfort can twist, how silence can become louder than sound, how someone familiar can feel foreign in an instant. It wasn't what he did, it was how he erased it the next morning, how easily he smiled, how smoothly he stirred eggs, how quickly the night disappeared from his voice while it stayed carved into mine. Some stories aren't told in panels, they're told in pauses, in silences that stretch too long, in eyes that don't look away. when they should, in touches that hover, hesitate, then stay. I used to think danger came loud with yelling, with fists, with footsteps at midnight. But sometimes, danger is soft, it's quiet, it's the hand you trusted staying too long, it's the voice that once made you laugh, asking, "You too read one more page." And if you've ever had a moment like that, one you couldn't name, but couldn't forget, I want you to know something. It wasn't your fault. You weren't wrong for feeling unsettled. You weren't overreacting for going still. You weren't imagining it just because no one else saw. You don't need bruises to carry proof. Your silence was loud enough. Your freeze was loud enough. Your gut was loud enough. And if no one else has ever said it out loud, let me be the one. You deserved to feel safe in every room you walked into. You deserved to enjoy your favorite story without wondering if someone was watching for the wrong reason. You deserved better, and you still do. If you've ever felt a moment you couldn't name, write unread in the comments. Your story matters. Even if you've never told it out loud. Subscribe for more stories that speak the truths no one else does.